My Lord and my God, I firmly believe that you are here, that you see me, that you hear me. I adore you with profound reverence. I ask your pardon for my sins, grace to make this time of prayer fruitful. My Mother Immaculate, Saint Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me. Well, Jesus, we have celebrated some amazing feasts this past few weeks. We have passed through the Christmas season, and now we are walking with the wise men as they come away from the crib in Bethlehem to return back to their homes. And many of us are returning to familiar surroundings too at this time, either back to work or back to studies again. And as we log on to online classes and Zoom meetings, well, maybe we need a bit of a push to get back into the full swing of things again. And today's Gospel presents us with the beautiful story from Mark's Gospel of the feeding of the 5,000. Now, for most of us, it's a very familiar scene. So, Jesus, we want to try and use our imagination today as we pray through this Gospel to try to see it from a different angle and to appreciate how you are feeding us and encouraging us today. Miriam and her brother Shmuel had heard of Jesus from some relatives who had gone to Galilee for trading. So they were curious to hear this rabbi for themselves. And each, as you might expect, had their own motives for seeing Jesus. Miriam was coming of age and was expecting to be married soon. But as of yet, no suitor had presented himself. She was tall and worked hard, and by all imaginings was a great catch for any young man. But for whatever reason, it hadn't happened yet. There was a deep yearning within her to be in a different place in her life. And the prospect of marriage was sure to bring that new life that she so ardently desired. She had grown up in Jerusalem, and the rhythm of life in the city was very familiar to her. The journey to Galilee had come as a welcome break from the business of city life, and she had been glad to spend some time with Shmuel, her brother. Above all, the journey had given her ample time to reflect on all the deepest yearnings that had filled her heart. Not quite content with her life, she couldn't complain too much either. She found herself in a sort of in-between, where the pace of her life wasn't exactly matching up to her expectations, but it wasn't a complete disaster either. Shmuel, on the other hand, was bursting to see Jesus. He had generally a very light-hearted, carefree attitude, and he wore very lightly the achievements he had already made in many fields. He was what you might call naturally curious. Often he would start investigating some interest or another, and it would spiral into many different tangents and offshoots wherever his interest took him. Coupled with his curiosity and propensity to study and work very hard, he had a very sincere faith. Shmuel loved the ritual life of the temple. Faith always made perfect sense for him, and his studies with the rabbis of the law and the prophets served to deepen his love for God and for the word which he had revealed. What had most intrigued him was the notion that Jesus could be the Messiah, the one foretold in the prophets. Though he wasn't completely sure what this Messiah would say and do, he believed he would come. And the promise of Jesus being that Messiah drew him to Galilee to see him and hear him for himself. It had taken the two of them about 6 days to walk to Tiberias on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And even if they were a little tired from the journey, their spirits were up, and they were looking forward to the prospect of meeting and speaking to Jesus. After a day's rest, they set about to achieve the purpose of their journey, to seek Jesus. It was, however, proving a little more difficult than they had thought. Jesus was not to be found in the synagogue, nor in the public square. And some people had even tried to dissuade them from finding Jesus. Miriam and Shmuel were determined, however. Questions of the heart and hope-filled curiosity driving them forward. It was becoming clear, however, that they had not yet reached their final destination, and they were going to have to hit the road again in order to find Jesus. Following some promising leads, they headed on towards Capernaum. But Jesus was not to be found there either. For Miriam and Shmuel, the desire to find Jesus increased with every step. Just as when something eludes our grasp, for them, the anticipated meeting with Jesus became all the more important. How often, it's only whenever we seem to be prevented from doing something, do we realize the immense value that it actually has for us. Moving on a little beyond Capernaum, things suddenly seemed more promising. There were people gathered upon a distant hill, and though they couldn't quite see what it was all about, it certainly seemed to explain the scarcity of people in the villages. With the promise of meeting Jesus increasing, Miriam and Shmuel set off towards the hill. And as they approached from the bottom of the hill, from the side of the lake, they saw an immense crowd of people, old and young, sick and healthy, wealthy and poor. It was immediately apparent that these people had gathered with the one intention of listening to the man at the top of the hill. And though it was hard to make him out exactly, given that they were some distance away, they knew instinctively that this was the Jesus whom they were seeking. They had found him, but it was unlikely that they were going to get a chance to speak to him individually with such a huge crowd gathered. Just then, a burly fisherman type invited them to sit upon the grass with the others around them. And a few moments later, another equally burly fisherman came and handed them a quantity of bread and fish. There was a tremendous calm over the whole crowd, unlike the sensation of the crowds in Jerusalem. Within their own hearts, too, there was a calm. Though Miriam's restless heart still had its questions, she found in the presence of Jesus and this immense crowd a greater sense of peace than she had previously experienced. As Shmuel ate the very welcome ration of bread and fish, he found that not only was his hunger for food sated, but also his desire to be in the presence of Jesus. The feeding of the 5,000 is a most magnificent miracle that shows us your power, Jesus, over material elements. In the same way that you miraculously multiplied the bread and the fish, so you miraculously changed the elements of bread and wine into your own body, blood, soul, and divinity at the Mass. We have tried to imagine, Jesus, what it was like from those who saw, heard, and were fed by you on that day. What was drawing them towards you? During Advent, we journeyed with the prophets towards Bethlehem, awaiting your birth as Messiah. Over the Christmas days, we rejoiced that you were born a man like us. At the Epiphany, we pondered the gifts of the wise men before your crib. Now, as we walk back to our ordinary lives with those wise men, we are accompanied by the stories and miracles of your life presented to us by the Gospel. Some words written by St. Josemaria have been guiding our meditation with Miriam and Shmuel. When I made a present to you of that life of Jesus, I wrote as an inscription, "May you seek Christ. May you find Christ. May you love Christ." 3 perfectly clear stages. Have you tried at least to live the first? We want to seek you, Jesus, every day, to find you and to love you. We have imagined how 2 people sought you to answer the questions and curiosities of their heart, and we do the same when we seek you in our prayer. Our 2 friends found you in the great multitude, whilst large gatherings are off the table for most of us now at the moment. The church is a gathering of your disciples, Jesus, that transcends borders and boundaries. And we find you, Jesus, within the church, in the community of faith that you have gathered since the beginning. Miriam and Shmuel loved you, Jesus, when they experienced your love for them, when you cared for them and nourished them, though they couldn't see you directly. Jesus, you care for us, even when you seem far away, and you provide for our material and spiritual needs in abundance. Jesus, may our desire to seek you find you and love you, bring us ever closer to your miraculous presence. I give you thanks, my God, for the good resolutions, affections, and inspirations that you have communicated to me during this meditation. I ask your help to put them into effect. My Mother Immaculate, St. Joseph, my Father and Lord, my guardian angel, intercede for me.